G'day and welcome to the match preview show. Our round 11 game against the Sydney Swans on Sunday. Interesting time slot. Obviously an away game at the SCG. 3:20 start. So just sort of originally when we saw this fixture, it was sort of nestled away. But now the fact that Victoria are now in a 7-day lockdown, I think it brings on a whole new audience to this game. It really does. It's a game that follows ours, Port Adelaide and the Fremantle Dockers. But if we're worried, and I'm not particularly worried what other fans or what the wider football community think about us, but if you're one of those, this is a great time. This is a great time against good opposition. I don't think they're top echelon Sydney, but they're good opposition on their own football ground, which is a difficult ground to play. Wouldn't it be great to get the 4 points, 2 in a row? We didn't play great football last week, but this is a great opportunity with going to be a really big audience watching us in this game. Channel 7, always a bit of a worry when Channel 7 do our games on a Sunday, particularly when we play a team like Sydney in Sydney. So there'd be a lot of sort of that spruiking of blood culture and all that fucking garbage that we often hear. That's going to be excruciating. So get ready just to maybe turn that volume down. But as I said, massive opportunity against quality opposition. And I'm hoping they're a little bit off Sydney. They've been a little bit scratchy, their form of late. They've been up and down after a blistering start to the season. They come back from the West, a really tough game against the Dockers, whereas you wouldn't call our game against the Hawks particularly bruising. And we've got a relatively, other than the injuries we've got a relatively healthy list in terms of the guys that are on the park. I know Plowman goes out, but he can be replaced. We'll get to that shortly. Interesting. This is an opportunity just going through the history between these two clubs over the last 20 years or so. They've definitely, like Hawthorn, had the wood over us, although we have won the last two. And Teague has got the wood over John Longmire, so he's 2-0 against Big Horse. And this will be the first time, if we're able to secure the 4 points in this game against the Sydney Swans, this will be the first time since 1994. So that's 26 years ago. It's a long time ago that we won 3 in a row against the Sydney Swans. And I just thought I'd go back and have a look at the team that took the park that day. There was James Cook, Brent Heaver, Tom Elvin, Justin Madden, Stephen Kernahan, Stephen Silvani, Peter Dean, Barry Mitchell, Greg Williams, Craig Bradley, Troy Bond, Brett Ratton, Mel Hanna, Tony Lynn, Adrian Whitehead, Matty Hogg, Anthony Koutafidis, Michael Sexton, Ange Christo, Fraser Brown, and Andrew Mackay. And for the Sydney Swans, a former Carlton player, Simon Mitten-Connell, the Tasmanian, was playing for the Sydney Swans. That's a blast from the past. That's the last time we won 3 in a row against the Sydney Swans. Teague v Longmire. Obviously, Teague's, his third season as senior coach, or 2.5 really, against Longmire, who's been in the Cape now for 10 years, premiership coach. Coincidentally, both boys played their football careers under Dennis Pagan. I'm pretty sure Longmire definitely played his whole career under Dennis Pagan at North Melbourne. They didn't cross paths as players. I think Longmire retired after the grand final in 99, and Teague, for memory, went to the Kangaroos, was recruited from the Bush Rangers as a rookie in about 2000, then came across to Carlton, and then was coached again by Dennis Pagan. Did Teague then stay on for an extra year or so when Ratton took over? I'm not quite sure, but both of them obviously will take philosophies from Dennis Pagan and the way he goes about it. So I find that interesting as well. The coach's box will be huge in this game. There may be a little bit of anxiety with John Longmire. He wouldn't like that stat that Teague has secured 2 wins over him. There's no way he would like that. So hopefully he tightens up just a little bit in the coach's box. As I mentioned, blistering start to the season for the Sydney Swans. They're 6-4, sitting 6 on the ladder, won their first 4, took some big scalps early in the year. Obviously, Brisbane in round 1 was a huge win at the Gabba. Got the Tigers at the MCG, that was huge. And then Geelong at home, in a nail-biter. Played a lot of youngsters early in the year. Some of those have dropped off a little bit, whether that be injury or just a little bit of poor form or management. And I think they had something like 4 or 3 Rising Star nominees in the opening 3 or 4 weeks, which was quite unbelievable. So they do field a particularly young list, but they have got that really sort of experienced core group. Obviously, Parker and Kennedy and Rampy down back have been, significant players for a long time. And Lloyd obviously has been around the traps as well. So the defensive back 6 or 7 are relatively quite experienced. Their last, say, 5 weeks has been really scratchy. It's been up and down. They lost a little bit of form. And as I said before, I'm hoping they might be just a little bit tired coming back from a big trip to Perth last week and a nail-biter. So they've gone loss, win, loss, win, loss in their last 5 games. But they're due. They're due for a win because it went loss, the Suns away, win, Cats at home, loss, Melbourne away, win, Collingwood at home, and then loss, Fremantle away. So if you look at that form line, they're back at home. What we don't want to see is a W come Sunday at around about 5 o'clock. They're 4-5 at the SCG, so they've got that sort of fortress sort of thing back. They lost it for a couple of years. They were getting beaten quite regularly at the SCG, but they seem to have got that back. We know they play the ground, that smaller ground, particularly well. And the selections doing these preview on a Friday, particularly when we have obviously a Sunday game, they're extended squads. We'll get the final teams later on this afternoon. I think it's around about 5 o'clock that we get the final teams. But looking at the Swans just quickly, I did notice a big out with Tom Hickey injured. I think, losing him is significant. Can we take advantage of that? I mean, Sinclair is he's no mug in the ruck, but we have DeConning and Pitnet, who were pretty good in tandem in the ruck last week. So that's a significant advantage, I think. Losing Tom Hickey, who I rate, I think, when I think about it, I think he's in the top half a dozen ruckmen in the competition. And I reckon he took Max Gawn to the cleaners a couple of weeks back at the MCG. I thought he was outstanding in that game. And I get Oscar McInerney back. I reckon he is the best. Personally, I think he's the best out of that sort of crop of Sydney youngsters who are in either their first, second or third year. His ability on the wing, particularly at the SCG, is really damaging. He can get forward. He's quick. He's got a good engine. Can get forward and kick goals. So he'll need to be watched. He's been out for a week or two, and he comes back in. And I did notice that Nick Blakey's been dropped again. He was a sub a couple of weeks back, but that may be the second or third time that Nick Blakey, a top 10 draft pick from a few years back, has been dropped. And that one, I reckon, has flown under the radar. But we're not here to talk about the Sydney Swans. We're here to talk about us. And our extended 8 on the bench is interesting because we've got three blokes, or actually 2 blokes on that extended 8 who have come into the team. So we've got Jack Martin, who's come in, and Luke Parks, who spent a week in the VFL last week after being dropped, is coming into the team. We still have Honey, who was the sub last week on that extended 8. Gibbons, DeConning, Levi Casbolt, Mark Murphy and Jack Nunes. And obviously the only forced out is Plowman through suspension, but a knee injury as well. He wasn't going to play. I think it's a good opportunity, really, to see what we're like without a Lockie Plowman in the team. He's been a real sort of staple of that back 6 or 7 for a long period of time now. I reckon it's a great opportunity to see what we actually look like without him there. I don't think our back 6 or 7 have been in particularly good form over the last couple of weeks. We were dreadful against Melbourne for the whole game, absolutely dreadful. And in the first half last week, we were all at sea. Improved a little bit better after half time, but this is going to be a big test because I really rate Sydney's front half. Just looking at extended 8, I mean, just at face value, you'd think Martin comes in. You'd think Parks comes in to replace Plowman. And obviously De Conning stays in unless there's something amiss with him in terms of injury or soreness after playing last week. And Mark Murphy definitely stays in. So that leaves Gibbons missing out, Honey missing out, Casbolt. You could actually nearly mount a case to see Big Levi play. I thought we were a little bit toothless in our front half with some, other than Harry, with a big marking target. And we know the Swans are a little bit undersized in their back 6 or 7. Does Levi come in? I don't think he will, but, there's a possibility. Does Honey come in? Does Parks necessarily play? Is there a suitable matchup for Luke Parks? Is there a job for a Michael Gibbons on either a Lloyd or a Dawson across half back, or he's playing half forward as that defensive half? I don't know, but just at a pinch, you'd say Martin comes in, Luke Parks comes in, and De Conning and Murphy stay on the pine. So that's my changes. We'll just have to wait and see later on this afternoon. The matchups for this game, obviously tactically, we know what Sydney do really well. They're really tough. At the contest, they're tough, but they're not, you sort of go through their stats, they don't consistently win the centre clearances. In fact, in round 1 and 2, when they absolutely annihilated Brisbane at the Gabba, and then the following week against the Crows at home, won both of those games convincingly. They lost the centre square clearances convincingly. So it's not really a strong suit of those, even though they got Kennedy and Parker in there. So what they do rely on is turnovers and putting a lot of pressure on our ball carriers. They will do that. We know they bring that effort. They bring that effort each week, the Sydney Swans. And when they don't, that's when they tend to struggle. And there has been a little bit of inconsistency with their younger players in that regard, but we know they will always bring that. So turnovers will be absolutely critical in this game, not only sort of by foot, so disposal efficiency, whether that be by foot or by hand, but also decision making. And we know this hasn't been a strong suit of ours for a long period of time now. I think our disposal efficiency has improved, but we do seem to still have this consistent habit of making poor decisions. And if we do that against the Sydney Swans at the SCG on their ground, they're going to open us up like a fucking, a can of worms. They really will. And their front half is particularly dangerous. And they rely, what the Sydney Swans do is they don't really worry whether they win the clearances out of the middle, because they know they can get turnovers. They know they back their system in to win turnovers. And that's when they spread and become quite dangerous. So that worries me. That worries me on the SCG. So that sort of comes to our matchups. And I think some of them are going to be crucial. Obviously, the one we're all going to talk about is Buddy Franklin. And this one worries me. I'm hoping Buddy's a little bit sore from a trip to the West, and I know he kicked 6 last week. And he hadn't been in super form. I watched him really closely against Melbourne at the MCG about 3 weeks back, and he looked terribly out of form in that game. He played really deep in that game. So I didn't think he played at all well against Stephen May. So if he plays deep like that, Wiedering plays on him, and I think he is a fantastic matchup against Buddy if Buddy wants to, play man on man deep. But what worries me about Buddy, and I don't want Liam Jones going anywhere near, and I love Liam Jones. He's one of my favourite players. I don't want him going anywhere near Buddy Franklin, other than to support, and if Weeders gets caught out. But in terms of a matchup, if I see Liam Jones go to Buddy Franklin and that opening bounce, I'm starting to worry. I'm getting that sort of sweaty bum crack sort of stuff. I don't want him near him. He's fucking killed him in the past, and I just don't think he's smart enough for Buddy Franklin. So Weeders is the man, but it depends how Buddy plays in this game. because we only have to go 2 weeks back to see what a mobile Tom McDonald did to Jacob Wiedering in that first half. He took him to the cleaners. He made Wieders look anything but an All-Australian centre-half back, which we hope he will be in time. And it was a significant second quarter where McDonald, or even first half, where McDonald tore that game to shreds, and it was over. And I think after half-time, Wieders changed a little bit the way he played on McDonald. But I think if Buddy gets up the ground, which he likes to do at the SCG, it's a bit of a problem if Wieders wants to go with him. Because what we don't want to see is the ball being turned over and a sluggish, tired, lumbering Jacob Wiedering trying to chase Buddy Franklin. We just don't want to see that. So he'll play on him, Jacob Wiedering, but he'll have to play that role, which I think he did against Tom McDonald in the second half of the MCG, where it's a bit like netball, where Wieders is the goal defence and Buddy's the goal attack, likes to get up the ground. That Wieders doesn't follow him all the way up. He lets him go, and then he possibly comes a little bit of a responsibility for others as a team defence. And then Wieders stays back and protects that arc, makes it hard for Buddy to get back. A little bit like a goal attack and a goal defence in netball, where it's up to the goal defence not to let the goal attack back inside the ring, because I don't think he can go. I really don't think he can go with Buddy. But I'm hoping Buddy's a little bit sore and a little bit tired, because that one really worries me. Also in the front half, a couple of players that really concern me. Well, obviously Isaac Heaney, who can go in the middle, had 24 last week and a goal. He's kicked bags of 3 a couple of times this year, and he's a worry because he can mark overhead and he's fantastic off the deck. And our defence hasn't been great over the last couple of weeks. If you look at it, Stocker, Nunes, Sard, Williams. Does that mean Parks does come in and play on a Heaney, which is huge? That is huge. That is huge if that's the case. And the other one who worries me is Will Hayward, who hasn't been in good form himself. I think he's kicked something like 7 goals from 7 games this year, and he is a goal kicker, and he has a decent record against us. And what we do well is play guys who've been out of form into form, and they're 2 sort of hybrid forwards, Heaney and Hayward. So they mark well above their head, but they're also just as dangerous at ground level, and they're smart. They're smart and powerful. So that worries me, what those matchups will look like. And it needs to, and what we have is Newman, Sard and Williams, who I see as see ball, get ball type players, not necessarily defence first. Yeah, and we saw Liam Stocker play on Luke Bruce last week, and does he get the job on Papley? I mean, I don't know that. In the comments below, tell me what those preferred matchups would be. But that, to me, and they've got young Sam Wicks down there as well, a Category B rookie who's kicked some goals this year as well. He's another small. So we're going to have that work cut out, particularly if the Swans are able to get, I think they average 55 inside 50s this year, and they can score quite heavily. I think the wings become significant in terms of matchups. I'm sending, and I'm a rap for Matthew Cottrell. I know some of you want him out of the team. I'm a rap because he runs hard. I don't necessarily see him as particularly tough or a grunt player. I just think he works hard and consistently works hard. And right now, that's what we need. I'm sending him to Oscar McInerney just to keep McInerney honest. A like for like, and that leaves Wiedering on the other wing, possibly up against the Rowbottom, who are really great as well. The midfield's going to be intriguing. I don't think it's a brilliant Sydney midfield. We know what we're going to get from Parker and Kennedy. What we don't want to see at the end of the game is Kennedy and Parker just having absolute blinders, and Cripper and Ed Curnow having sort of so-so games. And the one that I think not so much has got under the radar is the move of Mills into the midfield as pretty much a permanent midfielder. Does Ed go with him? Does Ed run, not so much run with, but, keeps Mills accountable? Will be pretty interesting as well. And I think the other two boys, which I spoke about before, which are going to be significant, is that drive that Sydney get from Dawson and Lloyd. And Dawson's left foot is a thing of beauty. It really is. And I suppose that the Swans are going to have to somehow, find a matchup for Tom Papley. For Adam Sard. Similar type players in that regard. So, they're going to have to be concerned about his ability to get off as well. And on that SCG ground, his left foot's going to be really punishing and damaging. But the same with Dawson. So our half forwards and forwards are going to have to really work hard. When the ball hits the deck, it's going to have to be Fogarty and Murphy and Owies to be really busy and put on a lot of defensive pressure, And that goes to our forwards as well. Now, last week, I was particularly critical of Harry's game just because he dropped a lot of marks. He gets a pretty decent matchup this week because I think we've seen Tom McCartan beaten aerially this year. He's a good young defender coming through the ranks, but he's been beaten significantly in aerial contests this year. And there's no doubt I think McCartan will get Harry unless they decide to put... Wouldn't it be funny if they put Rampy on Harry? So that leaves, I suppose, Rampy for DeConning and at times Jack. But it's a real opportunity for Harry to dine out on this ground. It really is. That's about it. I'm relatively... I don't know. I just rate Sydney. I just think at home. I really rate them at home. I prefer this game to be at the MCG. I don't think they play particularly well at Docklands, so I'm glad we're not playing at the Marvel. I actually prefer to play them at the SCG in the Open than at Marvel. But there's an opportunity for us to not turn our season around, but really start to make some inroads, and get an opportunity to have a real crack at the West Coast Eagles the following week in some really good form. Because if we beat the Sydney Swans, we'll know then that we're in some reasonable form. But until then, we just don't know, do we? Until then, we don't know because we've failed every test so far. And this is not the ultimate test, but it's a fucking bigger test than playing Hawthorn at the MCG last week.